Right. So, dear Reyna, you asked me to make or send you something about fasting. So here I'm sending you something about fasting. Um, so the first thing about fasting, I'll try and make this as simple as possible. You already know how to fast. So the word breakfast comes from the term breaking fast. So you're fasting during the nighttime already in any case. Now, a lot of people, when they wake up in the morning, they have a furry tongue or, that feeling of kind of gamminess in their mouth. Some people might have a bit of a groggy head feeling, or maybe they smell a little bit, or they've been sweating a little bit at night time. These are all signs of detox. The reason why that happens in particular at night time is because there's a relatively long period of time of not eating. So you've finished eating in the evening. Hopefully your digestion is complete by the time that you fall asleep. And then once you've gone to bed and the body's completely done with digestion, it will start to move into a process of cleaning up the body. Digestion is the single most complicated thing that the body has to deal with. If you think of all the processes of, the chewing, obviously, but then the esophagus, going into the stomach, digesting proteins, which requires an acid environment, digesting starches, which requires an alkaline environment, moving on to the pancreas, providing all the enzymes to, again, further digestion before it moves on to the small intestine and the large intestine, where there's bacterias and fermentation and God knows how many different things going on. So it's a really, really complicated process, and the body's essentially in an emergency when we eat food. So it can't go into the process of cleaning up shop or dealing with, things that need to be handled, because it will always focus on the most important thing at hand. So you already know how to fast. Now, there's other kinds of fasting. So there's intermittent fasting, where that's one thing to maybe mention as well. So a lot of people, when the reason why they think they can't fast is because when they skip a meal or if they don't eat, they start to feel very bad, or they feel very groggy, or the head feels spinning, like they're spinning, or they feel very weak. And again, these are kind of symptoms of detox because they've not eaten for a while. The body's done with digestion, but now that they're awake, they're having the full kind of experience. Whereas when they're asleep, it's a little bit more comfortable. So you've got different kinds of fasting. You've got intermittent fasting, where people will generally not eat for an extended period. So maybe they won't eat for 16 hours in the day, and then they'll have an 8-hour window of eating, or they won't eat for 20 hours in the day and have a 4-hour window of eating. Or there's people who do one meal a day, where maybe they just squeeze that all into an hour's worth of eating, and they don't eat for 23 hours of the day. And the principles are essentially the same. These guys are coming from it from different kinds of science or whatever, but the principle is, again, pretty much the same. Once the body's done with digestion, it moves on to cleaning up. Some people now use the term autophagy, so cleaning up old proteins and making space for new ones. So that's kind of the benefit of intermittent fasting. But with intermittent fasting, when you have your meal, it could be of any order. Maybe people are eating steaks, or they're eating highly salted foods, or very fatty foods, or they could be whatever kind of foods, which isn't necessarily optimal for the body. But the fact that they've got this long period of time where the body's able to just focus a little bit more on cleaning up rather than digestion gives them a kind of an upper hand. Now, then you've got things like raw food fasting. Well, not fasting really, but people who go on raw food diets, and they also experience some benefit because the argument goes with raw food that it contains living enzymes that are able to pre-digest food, which pancreas then doesn't have to exert itself so much. So again, there's less of this difficulty in digestion. Also, they argue that cooked foods are denatured. The proteins have been changed. Their nature is changed, that they're dead and dying foods. And so they take a lot more energy on the body and also create this reaction in the body called leukocytosis. A lot of these things are disputed, by the way, by mainstream medical science, but raw foodists kind of hold true to them. Regardless of that, I've done raw food fasting, and I'd say that there's some truth in it, where it's not raw food fasting, but a raw food diet. There's some truth in it whereby it does take less for your body to digest. So you're able to digest a lot easier, and essentially then your body's able to go and focus on other tasks in hand, like fixing yourself. You've then got fruitarianism. Fruits are basically the easiest food for your body to digest. So again, even though you're eating maybe through the day, because the body's not concerned with digestion that for that long, it's able to focus on the other tasks in hand again. Fruitarians will also eat some greens, which takes a little bit more taxation on digestion, and nuts and seeds, which are much heavier and also take more on digestion, but these are typically a lot less than bread, rice, cooked potatoes, etc. Also, the benefit of fruit fasting is of a fruitarian diet is that there's a lot of soluble fiber, which is different to insoluble fiber like in bread, which is very gentle on the digestive system, can kind of help to clean up shop, and it's very obviously rich in water, so that also arguably helps to detoxify the body and help keep things moving down there. So that's fruitarianism. There's also juice fasting. Now with juice, there's really not very much to digest. It's already kind of pre-digested. There's no fiber, so there's nothing awkward for your body to take on. With juice fasting, you're obviously able to take in a very large quantity of vegetables or fruits. So you can get very little juice for a kilogram of spinach, let's say, but that juice will be a very concentrated kind of magic, or very full in nutrients and very nutrient dense and very full of vitamins. So you can juice fast. The argument there being that you may be deficient in some things, so your body is, being overdosed with nutrition. At the same time, it's taxing the body very little in terms of digestion, and so the body is able to go away and do its fixing job. Now, then we move on to water fasting, which is literally just the consumption of water. The interesting thing with water fasting is it's been found that people who often before a water fast are deficient in certain vitamins and minerals, what their blood serum test would show is deficient in certain vitamins and minerals, after or a short while during the water fast, when they're tested again, these imbalances have returned to normal. That's one claim, which I find a little bit hard to find. So juice fast makes more sense for somebody who may not have been treating themselves so well the last few years. But if you have, then and historically in times gone by, there's books in Christianity, the Dead Sea Scrolls. There's books in obviously Buddha fasted, although I believe he didn't recommend it as a way to find spiritual truth. In Hinduism, there's many things about fasting. In Ayurveda, in Islam, obviously, in Judaism, in many traditions, they talk about fasting, and fasting for healing, and fasting for mental and spiritual growth, mental focus and spiritual growth. So with water fasting, all you do is you cease from eating everything, and you proceed to go and continue to drink. You drink only water. By doing so, after about 2 days, you totally, scientifically speaking, deplete your glycogen stores in your muscles and your liver. And then your body has no choice. It has no sugar available to it, carbohydrate available to it. It has no choice but then to start consuming proteins or fats. Now, your body is infinitely intelligent, and the first thing it will kind of start to attack will be dead proteins, particularly in the muscles, making space for new muscles to build, and certainly burning through old fats, which often store away toxins. It's one of the places the body will store away toxins, and through fasting you're able to just burn through that rubbish and clean up house. So that particularly starts after about the 3rd day, although again, because you're fasting, you're not taking in food, the body is able to go into cleanup mode, pretty much after you've digested your last meal. But it does certainly seem, and most people who do water fasting would agree, that day 3 is when real magic happens, and you don't need to worry about fasting and coming awry or dying or falling ill or anything like that. In fact, the person who's fasted the longest last fasted for about 1.5 years. It's very, very typical for people to fast 7 days, 10 days, 14 days without any difficulty. Beyond about 14 days, I would perhaps recommend it be medically supervised. But certainly if this is going to be your first fast, or if you're doing a first fast, I'd recommend it to be 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, test the waters and see how you feel. But if you can get to 3 days, real magic starts to happen there. Pythagoras did it. Pythagoras opened a university where all of his students had to fast for 40 days, in fact, and do a certain breathing technique. If you start to look into it, you'll find miraculous stories behind fasting. The final type of fasting is called dry fasting, which is something that's I've not really come across in the historical texts, although the Muslims do it. Now, in the modern day context, the people who are doing dry fasting, they claim that it's able to restart the kidneys, and that would tally well with the thinking that because you're not consuming anything, there's no excess for your kidneys to filter out, which is what the kidneys typically do. And because there's no excess water either, there's literally nothing almost for the kidneys to do. So since they're not working at all, they're able to regenerate very, very rapidly. That would probably be kind of next level fasting, but certainly water fasting is safe. It's well documented. It's well documented historically as well as in the modern day context. And can be regarded as completely safe. So that's a short video on fasting. There's a lot more to be said on the subject, but hopefully that gives you a good kind of introduction to the concepts and to kind of some of the thinking behind how they work and what's their efficacy.